The opening day of practice for the Austrian Grand Prix weekend has wrapped up, with Mercedes looking strongest in both sessions through Kimi and Tonelli. On the surface, Ferrari do not appear to be anywhere close to fighting at the front, but that might not tell the full story, because there was a lot happening today that does not usually happen when both Mercedes and Ferrari are in the mix. In this video, I am going to break down what Ferrari have been doing today, and why the telemetry from Lewis Hamilton suggests there is a lot more still to come from the team on Saturday and Sunday. To start with, let's look at their run plans for FP1 and FP2. Before the weekend began, the expectation was that they would hold off on introducing the new power unit, the AD01 engine, until Saturday morning in FP3. However, it now seems they may have brought it in during FP1 and then run it in a very conservative mode. That appears to be reflected in the telemetry between Hamilton's fastest lap and Berganovic's fastest lap in FP1. What stands out almost immediately is where Hamilton finds the lap time over Berg, and it is all coming on the straights. And that is happening even with a very detuned engine, nowhere near the maximum it can deliver. On top of that, they were also carrying out back-to-back checks in Berganovic's car, with and without the FTM, their flick-tail module, not only for 27 after it was confirmed today to be outlawed, but also with an eye on both Spa and Monza, or Spa and Silverstone, I believe, since they will be removing it for 2 of those 3 race weekends. Then, of course, FP2 looked a little more normal. Both Leclerc and Hamilton were out in the car, but they still seemed to be struggling. You could see that in the car's behavior every time we went on board during the session, and the on-track picture suggested the machine just was not in its sweet spot at all. There is also another detail worth watching. Take a look at the graph on screen right now, which compares Hamilton's quickest lap with Antonelli's FP2 topping time. Across the straights, you can see a dramatic gap between Ferrari and Mercedes. So what exactly are we looking at here? Essentially, we are looking at Antonelli's top speed compared with Hamilton's, and that comparison really highlights just how much Ferrari may have been dialing things back, while Mercedes, unusually, appeared to be pushing their engine harder than they normally would on a Friday. In the first sector, Antonelli leads the speed range at 328 kph, with Hamilton 5 kph down on that. But the difference grows even more in the second sector, where there is a 14 km/h gap between Antonelli's 319 and Hamilton's figure there. Then the same pattern shows up again in the final sector, with Hamilton another 9 kph slower. So once again, it suggests Mercedes were running more aggressively than usual, while Ferrari were keeping a lot more in reserve. And that is exactly what makes this so interesting, because it has been a similar story since Barcelona. There now seems to be a trend inside Ferrari, where they are showing less of their hand on Friday and then building into the weekend step by step. In FP1 in Barcelona, I believe the gap was around half a second. By the end of FP3, that had come down to 0.2, and then by qualifying, things were much tighter between Antonelli and Russell. That is why the Friday picture can be so misleading, and why so many people watching the timing data are refusing to jump to conclusions. On the surface, Ferrari can look off the pace, but if the team is holding something back, then the real comparison only starts when the weekend moves deeper into qualifying and race trim. That is where the bigger questions begin, because the gap on one day does not always tell the full story. What makes this even more intriguing is the way the data seems to point in 2 directions at once. Mercedes may have shown more outright speed than usual, while Ferrari appeared to be running with a much larger safety margin. So the conversation online is not really about who looked faster on Friday, it is about who still has room left to unlock later. And when a team follows this kind of pattern across multiple weekends, commentators start paying attention very quickly. That is the tension heading into the rest of the weekend, because if Ferrari really are building step by step, then the picture could change fast once the cars are turned up again. And that same pattern seems to have shown up again today. A bigger gap in FP1, a smaller one in FP2, and I would expect that to tighten even more in FP3, and then of course in qualifying. So the way Ferrari are structuring these practice sessions has clearly changed for whatever reason, and honestly, I think it is an interesting approach. Looking ahead to FP3, and even more importantly to qualifying and the race, the big question is what Ferrari might still have tucked away for themselves and for the rest of the field. And I think the first thing they need to do is get on top of the balance issues. That car looks like a real handful, especially when you compare it with how calm that Mercedes W17 looks in Kimi Antonelli's hands. There still seems to be quite a bit of lap time, or at least easy lap time, sitting there in the handling if they can sort it out. But there could also be another explanation behind what we saw. Purely based on the available data, it may also come down to fuel load. Ferrari could be doing what they did in Barcelona, running heavier in FP1 and FP2, and with the hotter track temperatures as well, that would help explain the picture we got today. And that is why the reaction online has been so split, because the same data can be read in two very different ways. Some viewers think Ferrari are clearly holding back, while others believe the car is still too unsettled, and the team is simply masking a deeper issue for now. Either way, the numbers are not giving a clean answer, and that is exactly what keeps people guessing. If Ferrari have really built Friday around caution, then the real picture may only appear once they start leaning on the car harder in the next sessions. But if the balance remains this difficult, then even a lighter fuel load or a more aggressive engine setting will not solve everything on its own. That is the part worth watching, because the story here is not just about top speed, it is about whether the package can finally come together when it matters most. So for now, the weekend still feels wide open, and the gaps we saw today may not be the gaps that matter later. If they can sort that out, the picture changes fast for them. The lap time gains should start showing up everywhere, through the mid-corner, into the corner entry, on the exit, and then again on the straights once they finally turn the engine up. And I do think that could put them in a range where they are close to, or at least putting real pressure on, Mercedes and maybe even Max Verstappen in the updated RB22. I still expect them to be ahead of Red Bull, whatever happens. But this weekend, I really think it comes down to a few key things. First, they have to tidy up the handling problems. Second, that new engine needs to be opened up properly, because that should help their straight-line speed. And third, and most important, they have to keep that strong tire management advantage that we saw work so well for them in Barcelona. They are going to need that in their back pocket again, especially with this weekend looking like it could be at least a 2-stop race, and maybe even 3 stops, depending on how well you can protect the tires. So those are the 3 big areas to watch for Ferrari, especially on Saturday when we get to FP3. That is exactly why the conversation around Ferrari has stayed so active online, because people are not just reacting to one lap time, they are trying to figure out what kind of weekend setup the team is really building toward. When a car looks uncertain in one session, and then a little cleaner in the next, the reaction tends to split fast, and that is what seems to be happening here. Some viewers are reading the data as a sign that Ferrari are still hiding a lot more pace, while others think the car is simply not settled enough yet for the numbers to look encouraging. Neither side has a clean answer at this stage, and that uncertainty is what keeps the debate moving. It also means every small improvement in the next session will matter more than usual, because it will help show whether the trend is real or just a temporary shift in conditions. And that is where the pressure starts to build. If the team can bring the balance together, the performance picture could open up quickly. If not, then even the stronger straight-line numbers may not be enough to cover the gaps elsewhere. So the focus now turns to whether Ferrari can turn Friday's mixed signals into something more convincing when the track action picks up again. Because at the moment, the weekend still feels like it could go in more than one direction. If the car does start looking and handling better, then we will know they made the right calls overnight, and things can begin to settle back into a more normal pattern with that run plan they usually follow. But if I had to stick my neck out here, I do not fully expect Ferrari to turn this around to the same level they managed in Barcelona. I just do not see it yet. I think they can get a lot closer, but from everything we have seen so far, I do not think they are in realistic race victory territory just yet. Of course, time will tell whether that view holds up or whether I am being too cautious, because a lot would need to line up for that to happen. So I will leave it there for now. If you enjoyed breaking this down with me and want to keep track of how Ferrari's Friday hints compare with the real picture on Saturday, make sure to like, subscribe, share the video, comment your thoughts, and I will see you on the next one.